to the investigation that there were no signs of an assault inside Nancy's house. The house was mostly clean, and the way it was described to me is that some rooms were actually immaculate.
We got to talk about what actually happened behind those quiet walls that night. From the moment Savannah Guthrie stood before the cameras to tell the world her mother was gone, things changed. A dark assumption was baked into every headline, every report, and every viewer's twisted imagination. Everyone expected to see total chaos, a violent struggle, or some visible evidence of a brutal fight. That would be the only logical way a woman vanishes from her home in the dead of night. Nobody said it out loud, but the grisly subtext was right there in every single report. The locks, the door, and the silence of the neighbors all pointed towards something far more sinister. Something happened. Then Brian Entin posted a major update at 5:36 p.m. on March 31st. If you read it closely, everything you thought you knew about Nancy's house just got a lot messier. A source close to the investigation claims there were no signs of a physical assault inside the home. Even more confusing, certain rooms were described by this source as being essentially immaculate. This source notes there were no signs of a fight and the house was kept mostly clean throughout. Sit with that word immaculate for a minute, because it ain't a neutral forensic term at all. Nobody describes a crime scene as immaculate unless they're trying to drive home a specific point. That point cuts straight to the core question this whole investigation has been dodging since day one. If the inside of the house was undisturbed, then what did those first responding deputies actually see? What made Sheriff Nanos assign a homicide detective to this case from the very beginning? That is the same question Jennifer Coffindaffer asked within hours of Entin's post going live. We're going to spend this time unpacking that, because the answer reshapes the entire grim reality. Before we get into what Entin's source is claiming, let's make sure we're on the same ground. This audience has been tracking this case closely, and the smallest details are what matter. Nancy Guthrie was reported missing from her Tucson home way back in early 2026. We've covered the timeline before, but what matters now is what was actually found at the house. Here is the cold reality of what the Pima County Sheriff's Department has officially confirmed. They found blood at the front entrance, and tests confirmed that blood belonged to Nancy. The blood pattern, according to reporter Ashley Banfield, was made up of several distinct, undisturbed droplets. Those droplets continued over the threshold and out the front door, remaining identical and totally undisturbed. It's a trail of blood droplets leading from the front hall and crossing over the threshold. Let me be precise about the sourcing here, because getting the facts right is everything. The DNA match for Nancy's blood at the entrance is confirmed by the department as public record. The description of droplets moving over the threshold and outward comes specifically from Ashley Banfield. This came from a single source and wasn't officially confirmed by the department in any statement. We report it and we attribute it, but regardless, there was blood at the front of this house. It is Nancy's, and the pattern suggests she was moving outward, away from the home's interior. Now, here is what Entin is reporting tonight, citing one unnamed source close to the investigation. That source says that inside the house there weren't any signs of a violent assault. These rooms were described as immaculate, while confirmed blood is sitting right at the front threshold. You have a pattern suggesting outward movement and an interior that a source claims was undisturbed. Those two things can coexist, but they raise a very specific and pointed set of questions. Where did the violence start? And what did Nancy's last moments inside that house actually look like? Let's talk about blood pattern analysis and what finding blood at a threshold really tells us. The location of this evidence ain't incidental, it's the most significant piece of the puzzle. In forensics, thresholds are liminal spaces, the thin line where the nightmare truly begins. Picture a smear of red right on the wood where your home ends and the cold, dark world begins. The public street. When red hits that wood, every investigator starts with one question: which way was the body heading? Direction was that person moving? If blood is found on the inside edge, right within that frame, or on hardwood leading straight for the exit, it tells you someone was headed out. It means they were hiking it on their own, being led, carried, or hauled like baggage toward the street. If the blood is outside, or just at the lip of the door spilling out, it means the violence happened right as they crossed that line. Maybe a fall, maybe a strike, but the impact happened right there at the edge of the world. Word is from Banfield, and keep in mind, the cops ain't confirmed this yet, that the blood looks like small droplets, trailing over the ledge and out the front. That trail tells a story. It tells us the heart was still pumping, pushing red out as they moved, not just sitting in a puddle. Something was leaving the sanctuary of that house. Now weigh that against reports that the rest of the place, certain rooms especially, were spotless. If that house was truly perfect, with no flip chairs, no scuff marks, and no signs of a fight, then the blood at the door screams, because it means whatever tore into her happened right there at the exit, not in the back of the house. It means the moment where Nancy was home and Nancy was gone happened at that one single point, the front door. That ain't some random job. That ain't luck. That is surgical. Whoever snatched Nancy Guthrie, if that is the nightmare we are looking at, knew her spot, knew her clock, and knew how to pull her out without making a mess inside. That blood on the ledge is the only scrap of proof that things turned physical. Just think about the nerve that takes. Think about the prep work, the access, and the deep-seated knowledge of Nancy's life, her home, and every move she made that this kind of clean extraction needs. We have talked about that backdoor access until we were blue in the face. We have looked at the possibility that this was an inside job done by someone who knew way more than a stranger ever should. The way the blood fell, if Banfield is right, and that sterile interior, if Entin is correct, paint a picture that just doesn't fit with some impulsive heat-of-the-moment act. This was a hit. It was targeted, and those drops at the exit make you wonder if she saw it coming, of whether Nancy saw it coming, and if she walked to that door on her own or if she was forced. Then there is the angle of trust versus fear. There is one more piece of this blood puzzle that hasn't gotten the light it deserves, and it ties right back into the questions Jennifer Coffindaffer is asking. Let us look closer. A blood trail tells a detective way more than just a destination. It reveals the physical state of the human being who was bleeding out. A trail from someone who was upright, walking, or even stumbling under their own steam looks nothing like a trail left by someone being hauled or dragged like a sack of grain. The gaps between drops, the way they hit, and the flow of the trail, those are the real clues. Drips falling from a wound on a body that is upright and in motion leave a very specific mark. When you are moving, those droplets get a little stretched out, showing a spray pattern that points exactly where you are going. But if you are being dragged flat, the whole thing shifts. The spacing, the physics, the way the world sees that blood changes. We ain't got the official lab reports. We don't know what the county analysts really think about the mess on that ledge, but the reports say droplets kept going over the threshold and out the front door. If that is true, it means someone was on the move, not just bleeding in one spot, not a stationary wound, but a body moving through space and time. But what it hides and what Coffindaffer is hitting on is whether the person leaving that trail wanted to go that way or was forced to. And that spotless house makes that answer a lot harder to swallow, because if Nancy walked to that door herself, if she was moving on her own 2 feet when she crossed that line, then whatever lured her, there has to be explained. Why would a woman head to her front door in the dead of night? What could get her out of bed, moving through the dark, and opening that door? It is either trust. A cold house with no signs of a fight can be scarier than a blood-splattered wall if it means the predator was invited in. That trust factor starts carrying a hell of a lot more weight, meaning whoever snatched Naya probably wasn't a total stranger to her. They had a key or a smile she recognized, giving them the kind of easy access she never would have granted a common predator. I've spent plenty of time looking at how someone got inside, and I ain't gonna waste time rehashing every detail today. But you gotta hold on to that thought, that choice between trust and terror at the front door as we hit the darkest part. See, the answer might be hidden in what those deputies first saw, the same clues that let them call this a murder. Way before they ever told the public a damn thing, it all comes down to one word: immaculate. We need to sit with that word immaculate for a minute, because it didn't hit home the way it should have when reported. People just glanced at it and kept scrolling through feeds, but in a world of missing persons and empty beds, it screams. Especially when cops bring in homicide squads on day one, the word immaculate ain't just some casual, offhand descriptor to be ignored. It's a loud forensic alarm. What does it actually mean for a room to be that clean when a girl's gone missing? First off, it might mean nobody fought for their life, that the chairs stayed upright and nothing moved an inch that night. No blood on the walls, no shattered glass, nothing to show a human being was clawing to survive in that quiet space. In the most basic sense, immaculate just means nothing was touched, but there's a second, nastier meaning we gotta weigh here. A room can be scrubbed until it shines, made to look perfect by someone who's got plenty of secrets to hide. Scenes get staged, and evidence gets bleached away. When investigators walk into a house where a woman is just gone and find rooms that look way too perfect, that unnatural cleanliness starts looking like a silent confession all on its own. I've talked about staging before, about what it implies if the scene at Naya's place was manipulated before any sirens arrived. If someone moved through those rooms like a ghost, repositioning furniture or wiping down surfaces to bury the ugly truth. Now look, let's be real clear here. We don't know for sure why that source used that specific word to describe it. I ain't saying for a fact the scene was staged, but I am saying that the word immaculate opens a dangerous door. That word don't close the book on this case, it rips it wide open, especially when you consider how staging works. Killers almost never get it right. Something's always a little off, a little too neat, a little too deliberate for a home. There's a gut-wrenching gap between what the room shows and what the investigators know happened to that poor girl inside. Those tiny forensic dissonances are exactly what the pros are looking for when they sweep a house for any hidden clues. So when that source says certain rooms were spotless, you gotta ask yourself who actually wins by letting that info out. Is some insider trying to calm the public by saying there wasn't a violent bloodbath in Naya's private home? Or is this a quiet warning that the house was so clean it felt wrong, like something was hidden from view? The language is sharp, not all rooms, just certain rooms, and that one little word is doing all the heavy lifting. We're left in the dark about the rest because the report didn't say, but they specifically highlighted those clean spots. That suggests, maybe, that some parts of the house didn't look nearly as pretty as the ones they chose to mention. Where those clean rooms are and what they hide is something I'm going to be watching until we get some real answers. Because if some rooms were pristine while other areas held secrets forensic teams are hunting for right now, it's over. Then the story of what happened to Nya is way darker than a simple everything is fine press release suggests. Then you've got Jennifer Coffindaffer, a veteran retired FBI agent who didn't waste a single second after that report hit the streets. She didn't offer any comfort. She came out swinging with 3 hard questions that should make your skin crawl tonight. Before I lay out what she said, you need to understand the weight of the person actually doing the talking. This ain't just some talking head. She's a veteran Fed who knows exactly how these monsters try to cover their tracks. She's been one of the few voices consistently calling out the holes in this investigation without even blinking an eye. She doesn't play games or hide behind that the cops know best excuse that some other analysts use to hide. When the math doesn't add up, she shouts it, and her response to that immaculate report was a direct forensic hit. She had 3 specific, razor-sharp questions, and the one that really blows the lid off this whole thing is this one. If that house was so perfectly quiet, why the hell did Sheriff Nanos put homicide on the case starting day 1? That's the million-dollar question, and it screams that there's a massive gap between the narrative and the actual police actions. That's where the truth is buried, and that's exactly where we're going to have to look as this nightmare continues on. The metallic tang of blood hung heavy there, and this part needs its own spotlight. It ain't a simple question, it's a deliberate move. This choice was made by the top dog of the department in those frantic first hours of the hunt. Before we get there, let me lay out what we know about the other red flags she raised. They ain't just filler. They're the whole damn structure. Coffindaffer's second point, put out there for the world, hit on the total lack of a struggle inside. She pointed right at that empty, quiet interior and what it means for the clock ticking on this whole nightmare. If Nancy didn't get snatched from her living room and the house stayed spotless, then the horror happened somewhere else. It went down at the door, inside a cold car, or at some dark secondary spot we haven't found yet. Each path leads to a different kind of hell. A murder inside a home always leaves a scar or a trace behind. You're looking for stray hairs, blood spatters, broken nails, or those frantic scuff marks on the floorboards and carpets. That's the stuff forensics can bag and tag to nail a monster to the wall. But a crime that starts outside, on a porch or in a truck, is a ghost. It's damn near impossible to reconstruct. It's even worse if the clock's been ticking and the rain's been washing the secrets away. When Coffindaffer asks this, she's really asking, if the house is clean, where's the body of evidence? Has too much time slipped by? Is the scene so tainted that whatever was left out there is gone for good? Her third question, I want to be precise here, landed on March 31st on social media, and it was all about the blood. If there's blood at the door but the house is like a showroom, what's that telling the guys in the suits? What does that trail say about how it went down? Was it one quick violent strike? Or did she bleed out slowly as she was moved? Banfield said the droplets led right across that threshold. They trailed out the front door and into the night. Does that tell us if Nancy walked out on her own feet? Does it say she was still alive but hurt, or was she already just weight being moved? These ain't just thoughts. This is what a Fed asks when someone starts using words like immaculate to describe a missing woman's home. Now, let's hit the big one. Homicide from the jump. That was the play. Why did Sheriff Nanos put a murder investigator on this from hour one? That's on the record for everyone to see. Every major news outlet has confirmed it, and nobody's saying it didn't happen. From the second they responded to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, way before anybody turned up, before they knew how she died or if she was even dead, the sheriff sent in the homicide heavy hitters. I need you to feel the weight of that move in real procedural terms. If you don't know how the brass thinks, you might think they were just being extra careful. They weren't. Homicide guys are a different breed. In a place like PCSD, they only come out for the dead. They deal with the suspicious ones, the murders, the ones where nature didn't have a hand in the ending. They look at the ones who didn't end their own lives. They don't usually touch a missing persons file on day one. A normal missing person goes to a general squad or a specialized unit if there's a kid or old person involved. Maybe it hits the crimes against children desk, but calling in a homicide detective immediately is a specific, heavy statement. It's a choice made at the very top. It's a label. It says, we believe something dark happened. It says, they're already looking for a killer. Let that sink in for a second. Dragging a homicide detective out of bed on day one ain't just a precaution. It ain't just playing it safe. It's a command-level call that says the scene they walked into was consistent with a violent crime that ended in death. And then you got a source telling Brian Entin that some of the rooms in Nancy's house were absolutely pristine. If there was no struggle inside, what did those first deputies see that made them call the murder squad? What was so wrong in that house that it didn't just look like a woman who'd wandered off? Why wasn't it a general detective? We've been told the place was clean, but they treated it like a morgue. We know the blood was at the door. We know her DNA was in it. But those facts on their own, the ones they're letting us see, describe a scene that could go a few ways. If you just look at that, you could call it a snatch and grab. But the sheriff knew something else, something that made a missing woman look like a murder from the very first breath. Coming from a secured spot like that, it ain't just a leak. It is a federal offense, the kind of heavy hit that drags in an FBI joint task force before the sun even sets. Your typical missing persons case with signs of a kidnapping don't usually pull a murder squad. It wouldn't look like a homicide on the surface unless what? Unless what those first boots on the ground saw what those deputies touched, documented, and whispered back to their commanders was something far darker. They're holding something back from the public, something so grim it gave them the certainty to make a hardline operational call right then and there. They knew, with a gut-wrenching finality, that Nancy Guthrie wasn't coming home in one piece. Now I gotta be straight with you here. I ain't claiming to know exactly what that horror was. We aren't out here guessing about every scrap of evidence they might have bagged or missed. What we're doing is staring right into the void, the documented, sourced, stone-cold gap between two things that just don't add up. They say those rooms were spotless, yet they called in a murder detective on day one. Both those things cannot be true at the same time. Not without a third ugly fact bridging the distance between them. And that fact, it's still buried. That's exactly where Jennifer Coffindaffer's question hits home. She ain't just talking to hear her own voice. She is asking because she understands the brutal, tactical math of a homicide deployment. She knows it's a definitive choice, not just some just-in-case move. She's telling the world that the scene's description just doesn't fit the response. Brian Entin's source says it was a clean house, with blood only staining the front threshold. That's the story they're sticking to for now. But a clean house doesn't buy you a full-blown murder investigation from the jump. Something else was in that house, waiting in the shadows. We don't know what it was yet, but let's look at what the scene is screaming at us. Step back and look at the whole damn picture. When you start connecting the dots, a specific, ugly theory of how Nancy died starts to take shape beneath the surface. It's emerging, but I'm being careful here. This is an analysis of the facts we have, not a final verdict. That difference matters in a case like this. Here's what the physical evidence, at least what's been leaked and sourced, is whispering to us. Nancy Guthrie's blood was right there at the door. It's her DNA, PCSD confirmed that much. And the way Banfield describes it, that blood trail flows outward, across the threshold, toward the dark outside. But the inside? A source close to the case told Entin that the rooms were clean, showing zero signs of a struggle or a violent assault. If you're a forensic tech looking at those clean rooms, what goes through your mind? You're looking at a crime that started right at the exit. Or maybe it was a crime so meticulously contained to that one doorway that nothing else was touched. A surgical, terrifying strike. Whatever violence went down, whatever made Nancy bleed out, happened right as she was leaving her sanctuary, not a second before. It happened at the threshold. And that brings up the one question we've been circling like vultures since this whole thing started. Did Nancy open that door herself? Think about it. This ain't just some small detail. It's the heart of the whole damn case. If she walked to that door, turned the deadbolt, and stepped into the night air, it means she wasn't ripped from her bed. It means nobody jumped her while she was watching TV. It means she was moving on her own 2 feet toward that exit. But why would she do that? Was she lured out into the cold? Did someone she trusted or someone who looked safe call her name? Was there a late-night knock? A frantic text? Something that made her believe it was okay to open the door at that hour? That'd explain why the house was so quiet. No fight, no furniture knocked over. Just a woman walking willingly toward her end. Or, and here's the second, more sinister possibility. Maybe the scene was controlled and wiped down after she was already gone. Was the house scrubbed to look untouched? Was Nancy moved from somewhere inside and the evidence of that horror wiped away? Was the whole thing staged before the sirens started wailing? We've talked about the staging theory until we're blue in the face. We looked at the back door, we looked at the gaps in the timeline, we talked about how someone with insider knowledge could have done this. Someone who knew her schedule, the house layout, and the family's secrets. A clean house doesn't kill that theory, it feeds it. If anything, a spotless interior makes that theory feel even more real. A professional staging would look exactly like what Entin's source described. But staging can't explain everything. It can't explain why they treated this as a murder from minute one. If the house was truly clean and staged to look like a simple disappearance, the cops would have seen exactly what the source said. They would have seen a tidy home, a little blood at the door, and a missing woman. That's a kidnapping, sure. It's serious, but it ain't an automatic homicide call, not unless there was something that the person staging the scene missed. Something that first deputy saw, something that made him radio back to command with a voice full of dread. Something that told the brass they were looking at a corpse, not just a missing person. A death investigation right out of the gate. What the hell was it? We're still in the dark, but you gotta understand the sheer weight of that choice. Nano's call to bring in the murder squad on day one ain't just some boring piece of paperwork. It's a flashing red light. It's the biggest clue we have about what those cops really saw in those first few hours. And right now, it just doesn't square with the clean house story. Something else was there. Something that changed everything. Nancy's blood was tacky on the porch while the rooms inside were perfect. Nanos' actions don't fit the story we're being sold. I've been dragging you toward one ugly question for this whole investigation, and I promised we'd get there. It's time we looked it right in the teeth. Just look at the loop. A woman vanishes into thin air. Her own blood is drying right there on the front doorstep. That blood spray points outward, like she was dragged into the night, yet the rooms inside are described as being completely spotless. No furniture overturned, no signs of a real fight. Yet, the brass sends in the homicide squad on day one anyway. From the jump, I've wanted you to sit with this one thought. How do those two facts live together in the same house? This ain't just some minor slip-up in the story. It's a massive, gaping hole in the narrative they are trying to sell. If that house was really a sanctuary of order, and the floorboards only tell the story of a woman simply walking away, then the trail of red at the door doesn't automatically scream murder to a seasoned veteran cop who's seen it all before. But Nanos called it a homicide investigation before the sun even went down that first day. He knew something we don't. Now, there are only a couple of ways you can make those two truths sit at the same table together. Maybe that source talking to Entin didn't have the full picture or see behind every single closed door in that house. Maybe Immaculate only described the kitchen or the hall, while other corners of that home told a much darker, bloodier story. Entin was careful. He said certain rooms, not the whole floor plan. That tiny distinction is everything in this case. If the crime scene was a mix of sterile spaces and blood-soaked corners, the homicide tag finally starts to make sense. It means the cops found a hell of a lot more than they're currently letting on to the public. The word immaculate becomes a shield, technically true, but hiding a much uglier reality from everyone watching this play out. Or maybe the reason they called in the heavy hitters had nothing to do with what was inside those walls. Maybe it was intel. Secrets about Nancy's life, her lovers, or threats whispered in the dark before she ever went missing. Something told the deputies before they even finished the first sweep that she wasn't ever coming back on her own. This wasn't a runaway case or a random snatch and grab. They knew this was a brutal, final ending. They moved for homicide based on a shadow they were already chasing, not just the red stains on the floor. That's the part that gets under your skin, the idea that the law knew the end before the first chapter was written. It suggests they were sitting on a mountain of truth while the public was left guessing in the dark for weeks. Then there's the third option, the one I'm not going to pitch as fact, but I'm damn sure naming it. That homicide call on day one was made because the responding officers saw something on that property they couldn't unsee. Not just the blood, not just the clean rooms, but a piece of evidence sitting right there in those first reports. Something that hasn't touched a news report yet, but answers every question the experts are currently screaming about. We don't have the key to which door is the right one, but we know all three are standing wide open. You have to weigh every single one of them against the polished story the department has been trying to generate. Because all Sheriff Nanos has offered us are empty promises and stiff, rehearsed press conference performances at those podiums. He hides behind legal jargon and procedural walls, never explaining why he treated this like a killing from the very start. Why hunt for a killer in a house where a close source swears the rooms were as clean as a Sunday morning? That distance between what Nanos did and what the scene supposedly showed isn't just a small administrative crack. It's a flare in the night. It's the kind of red flag that keeps seasoned pros like Jennifer Coffindaffer awake. It's a signal that you, after everything we've looked at, can't afford to let go of just yet. As for where this nightmare goes next, let's look at exactly where we're standing right now. Brian Entin's report hit the wire at 5:36 in the afternoon on March 31st, racking up 54,000 views. If that info is solid, if that source really is inside the inner circle, the whole board just changed for us. It flips the script on everything we thought we knew about what happened in Nancy Guthrie's private sanctuary. We've got a single source claim now, flat out stating there wasn't a single sign of a struggle inside the home, that those rooms were pristine. Meanwhile, the department already admitted her blood was found on the scene. Fresh blood at the threshold, pointing out toward the street, according to what Bayfield's people are currently saying. And we have a public record that's been backed up by a dozen different mainstream sources now. Every heavy-hitting outlet is starting to smell the same smoke we've been watching for weeks. Before the blood even cooled, Sheriff Nanos didn't hesitate. He called in the murder squad on day one. Jennifer Coffindaffer's out there screaming the question that sits right at the heart of these three facts. It's a question that needs an answer, but not from us. It's the lawmen who owe the damn truth. We ain't the ones with the badges. The public officials running this hunt need to start talking. They've been staring at the facts while we're left digging through the jagged scraps of leaked reports. What those first responders find in the shadows, what was rotting inside, and what the files actually say. Why'd they tag this as a murder before a single soul even breathed a word about the evidence found? It's beyond alarming, and we're going to keep yanking that thread until it all finally snaps. We're piecing together more of this story right now, digging into the parts they want buried. These new angles tie right back to the grim picture we've been painting this whole time. That second ransom note, the Pima County deputy, the house next door, and that jacket, it's all there. Every bit of it feeds into the one massive question: what really happened to Nancy Guthrie? Does the story they're telling the public actually match what the cops are seeing in the dark? But tonight, you need to hold on to that one doubt and never let it go. Scrawl it on the wall if you have to. The house was spotless, yet the sheriff called it a murder on day one. Those two facts don't fit, and the folks are still waiting for the truth to break. There is a storm brewing behind those precinct doors, and right now, that silence is starting to scream.